Good evening and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study in the book of Genesis. Tonight is study number 4 of Genesis chapter 1. And let's read from verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Okay, as we've seen, God created the heaven and the earth. He spoke, and he brought the heaven and the earth into existence. Notice it's heaven singular and earth singular, but at later points in the Bible we will read of heavens. And I think as we continue reading through Genesis 1, we'll see how God starts with the heaven and the earth, and then he will create plural heavens, as there is the heaven where the birds fly, and then the heaven of deep space where the stars are. And there's also a third heaven, the Bible tells us, which is in the spiritual realm of the kingdom of heaven. But at first, God created the heaven singular and the earth. Now let's move on to verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So, originally, God created the earth, and it was without form and void. Now, we'll look at these words, the Hebrew words, translated without form and void, in just a minute. But we can get an idea just from this statement that it's as though God created the substance. He created the matter. He created the earth as though it were clay or Play-Doh. And at first it's without form and void. And then he's going to work with that and form it and fashion it and create from this substance everything that he'll do later on concerning the heavens and the earth. And that wouldn't be too far from the truth of what God did. He created the earth, and the earth was without form and void. Let's look at the Hebrew word translated without form. And it's one Hebrew word, tohu is how I pronounce it. It's Strong's number 8414. And we're going to look at several places where this word is found. It's translated several different ways. Deuteronomy 32 and verses 9 and 10, it says, "For Jehovah's portion is his people, Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. He found him in a desert land and in the waste howling wilderness." The English word waste is the word without form, or the Hebrew word translated without form. And so he found him, Jacob, in a waste howling wilderness, and he led him about, he instructed him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. And so since it goes on to speak of a howling wilderness, and the first part of verse 10 tells us he found him in a desert land, we get the picture. It's an empty place. It's a wilderness. There's no trees. There's no lakes, no rivers of water. It's just a desert, dry land without anything but dust and dirt. It's a howling wilderness, or without form howling wilderness. Now in Job, we find the same Hebrew word, in Job chapter 6 and verse 18. The paths of their way are turned aside. And this is speaking of the wicked, the unsaved. They go to nothing and perish. Now, the paths of their way are turned aside reminds us of Isaiah 53 verse 6. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And that's when man turns from the commandments of God and commits sin. And then it says they go to nothing. And go to nothing is the Hebrew word, or translation of the Hebrew word tohu, Strong's 84:14, translated as without form in Genesis 1 verse 2. They go to that which is without form and perish. Now, that's interesting. This word is translated so far as waste and go to nothing. It's also in Job 26, in verse 7. He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. And you've probably guessed, empty place is that same Hebrew word, tohu. He stretches out the north over that without form, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. Well, we're going to keep looking. So far, we've looked 3 places and found 3 different ways it's been translated. In Isaiah 24, it's translated another different way. In Isaiah 24, if you remember, this is the chapter where God is describing the day of wrath, judgment day, in verse after verse. It is detailing the earth coming under the judgment of God. And in Isaiah 24, verse 10, the city of confusion is broken down, every house is shut up, that no man may come in. And the word confusion is this same Hebrew word. The city which is without form is broken down. We could understand it to be saying. And, I don't understand in all these places the significance of this word, but this is how we come to define a word in the Bible, by comparing Scripture with Scripture. Here a little, there a little, we see how God uses a word, and as we go along, we should be building a definition. And we can now see this word is translated waste in regards to a wilderness, go to nothing when men perish, an empty place, and confusion. Well, also in Isaiah chapter 34, and also in another chapter describing Judgment Day, we find the word used again. In Isaiah 34, I'll start reading in verse 8. For it is the day of Jehovah's vengeance, and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion. And the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the dust thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched, night nor day. The smoke thereof shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. But the cormorant and the bittern shall possess it. The owl also and the raven shall dwell in it, and he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. And again, it's translated as confusion, where it says he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion, or the line of that which is without form, and the stones of emptiness. And again, a very difficult verse, in Isaiah 34:11 to understand. And at this point, we're not trying to understand that verse. We're trying to understand Genesis 1 verse 2.